but we don't lament well. We love, like, that's uncomfortable. I hate my feelings, and I'm a therapist, guys. Like, I hate the feelings.
For me as a dad, I tried to help my kids identify these things in putting a name on it and helping them process it. But I know for me as an adult, it's taken me a long time to get there.
Hey, welcome to the Sonnal Focus Podcast. My name is Nick. I am your host, and this podcast is here to help you reclaim your life in a noisy and distracted world. Today, our guest is Lindsey Werner. She has 15 years as a professional counselor with a focus in emotional and relational health. It is going to be a great podcast. Why? Because we all need more tools in our relationship toolbox, because we have to build those relationships personally, professionally, and life goes so much smoother when you have a community who supports you with love. If you need a community that supports you with love, I have great news for you. We have launched the Sonnal Focus Community. You can go to school.com/Sonnal to join. It's absolutely free. There is a course there for you. There's community there for you, and it is a great place to start your focus journey. Let's hop into the podcast. So what is the theory of internal family systems, and why is it so important in today's conversation?
Oh, it's a great theory. If you haven't checked it out, it talks about there are different parts of us. Instead of thinking of ourselves as good or bad or one way or another dichotomously, it helps you kind of break things down into like almost little characters and roles that they play. And sometimes these parts can be pretty loud and they can say stuff that are pretty off base. And sometimes they're really but they're very powerful. And so when we help people pause, we're really helping them understand what's going on behind the scenes of their conscious thinking and what might be driving some of these anxious thoughts or anxious behaviors or insecurities or things like that. And once you give those parts some attention and a shape and a form, you observe them and you become friends with them. I always say we become friends with our symptoms. That's the best way to overcome any symptom that you're experiencing. So when we become friends with it, we understand it, then we can start understanding why it's there. It's not there to hurt us. It is there to help us in some way, but it may not need to have the driver's seat of your life. So trying to find a way to balance that has been a really fun experience.
I just want to double click on that because you said about making friends with the symptom. There's like a similar concept that comes from N.T. Wright. N.T. Wright kind of talks about, when he talks about sin, he says, sin isn't something that's necessarily meant to be battled. Sometimes sin is something that we need to be healed from. And so as we like double click into that, can you explain a bit why embracing and making friends with the symptoms, how does that actually help?
Absolutely. So first of all, I love God's word too. I'm a geek who loves neuroscience, and I think God's word just is so full of supporting neuroscience along the way. So in neuroscience, we understand that which you focus on is that which you become. And we also understand name it to tame it. So if you can name something, then you can start to tame it. So there's two concepts there. God's word has been saying this all along. And David says, search me, O God, and know my anxious thoughts. And if there is a wicked way in me, lead me to the path everlasting. Well, how are we supposed to know the path everlasting if we don't know when we're off course? And so becoming friends with that, like God doesn't look at us in shame and frustration, like get on the path, get on it. He's looking at us going, honey, here's the path, but we have lost our way on the path. We don't know how to stay on it if we don't know that we're on or off. So it's one of those beautiful things where God is really wanting you to be in touch with yourself. Like he created your thoughts, your capacity for thoughts. He created your capacity for feelings. Why did he do that? So you can use them. Not so you can dissociate from them. And in the church family, we struggle to understand feelings and thoughts in a healthy and productive way. And this is a great example of why it's so foundational, because we can't tame something we don't understand.
No, that's amazing. That's really, really great. I actually appreciate that because you also mentioned one thing that I think is really important to bring to this conversation is this idea of numbing. Like sometimes, like whether that's spiritual bypassing, whether that's just trying to avoid things, sometimes we numb ourselves, and I'm guilty of that. In the past, there have been certain things that I have done to numb myself instead of facing the problem head on. Is it being friends with the symptom? Will that help get through the idea of numbing? Then, like, I or anybody who's listening can actually face what is going on behind the scenes.
Oh, that's really good. So it could be like a multi-step process, right? So not everything, though it sounds easy, or though it sounds simple is easy, it's not necessarily easy to do all these steps at once. It might take you some time to do all the steps that we're talking about right now. But yes, I too am very familiar with that desire to numb. And oftentimes there is a layer of grief there, and there's a layer of lament. And God's word has a wealth of a room for lamenting. But we don't lament well. We love, like, that's uncomfortable. I hate my feelings, and I'm a therapist, guys. Like, I hate the feelings. I'm afraid I'm going to get overwhelmed by them. I'm afraid they're never going to go away. And so it'd be much better if we just didn't deal with them, right? But they do sometimes take some time because they are intense feelings and experiences. I think we talked about this last time. Just a personal application of this is many of you probably know my son had cancer, leukemia, diagnosed at 18 months old. He is now 6 years old, and he's going to be a survivor this summer, y'all. It's going to be amazing. So that's really cool news. But you can imagine, with the stress that we were under, like, you just got to get through it. Like, there's no room for full lament because the season is requiring you to push and throttle and survive. So now, after we've been out of treatment for a while, we have different capacity and space for the lamenting process. But I think it might have been a gift that we were a little numb to it for a little bit. So we could have moved and survived and done what we need to do. So not all numb is quote unquote bad. It just may be like, when we become friends with it, we may be like, okay, that maybe Lindsey can't handle all of that right now. And maybe that's a blessing. And maybe it's okay to be a little bit numb, and we'll process that when we get there, you know? So there's just room for it to be not so picture A. There's lots of pictures that it could look like.
For me as a dad, I try to help my kids identify these things and in putting a name on it and helping them process it. And so, but I know for me as an adult, it's taken me a long time to get there. And so I'm curious to know, as you know, as I'm processing my own feelings and as I'm processing, you know, things that are going on in my own as an adult, how can I help my kids, you know, through that process? And so when they're an adult, they're a little bit better off than I am.
That's really good. First of all, I'm really proud of you for even thinking to do that, because it's not a natural instinct for us to want to learn that about ourselves. And it's very difficult for us to take our kids somewhere we've never been ourselves. Like, that's why it's like the blind leading the blind here. But that's what parenting is. We have all never been parents before, so we're just kind of navigating it out. I'll tell you one tool that has been probably the most effective tool that we use in our family. And are y'all familiar with Dan Siegel? Get to know him. You'll love him. The quickest thing that I can tell you about it is, I know you're probably listening, you're not watching right now, but if you make a fist and you think of the front part of your fist as your prefrontal cortex, the very front part of your brain, it's your good thinking part of your brain. It's the connecting part of our brain. So when this part is activated, it's our best thinking, our best self, our best relational self coming out. If you open your hand up and think about the palm of your hand as the fight flight response, it's in the back of your brain. Dan Siegel's so brilliant with this very simple diagram. He says, when this part of your brain is online, guess which part of your brain is completely offline? Your prefrontal cortex. And so he calls it, you flipped your lid. Ha ha. So for us, it's not about being wrong or right. And we usually shame our anxiety and say, just stop it. Well, if I tell you to stop thinking about a purple elephant and stop thinking about it with like little pink nails and stop thinking about it with a daisy on its hat, what are you thinking about? Exactly. So that which you focus on is that which you become in neuroscience. and in God's word. He says, think about whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, lovely, admirable, praiseworthy in Philippians 4:9. So what we focus on matters, but we do need some ability to observe what's revving and what's going on. So recently I've been, okay, if y'all have a friend named Becky or an aunt named Becky, it's not a mean, we're not saying something mean about Becky, but we've called the back part of our brain Becky, and it's been really fun. So what's been really helpful with my kids is now we're not attacking ourselves and like, what is my thoughts? But now Becky's talking to us. And so you can change the name to my son's name is Shanae. Like that's how he's called his brain. Shanae. My daughter's name is Becky. And Becky is really smart and Becky is really powerful. And Becky's role in your life is to keep you safe. That is her role. And if we don't pay attention to Becky and you're crossing the street, you might get hit by a car and Becky is going to save your life. Becky has saved my life every day, right? So it's a part of the body that God has given us, not to shame, not to dismiss, not to dissociate from, but to utilize with wisdom. She is not all wisdom and all knowing. So our thoughts and our feelings are not always right or accurate, though they feel very strong. And that's where the discernment comes. So first we pause, then we observe what Becky's saying, and then we discern. Like, what is she saying? What? There's probably some half-truths there. There's probably some little possibilities, but not full realities that she's saying. And when we let her drive that front seat of the car of our life, it is scary and it is overwhelming because their little thoughts will take shape. So for example, with a kid example, you notice your child's anxious. We have an instinct with our kids. We get it. We don't know what it's about, but we get it. So over time, as I've explained this little example to my daughter and to my son, I'll say, what do you think Becky's saying right now? And they pause and they say, oh, she's saying that if I go to school, that I'm going to miss you so much. I'm like that. It's like, I can't be safe. I'm like, well, and then we start discerning. Is that really true? What's really your resource? And what's Becky trying to protect you from? Yeah. And social faux pas. Like she's trying to protect your reputation. She's trying to like all sorts of things. So, and that's where the IFS journey kind of comes into play is there's all sorts of conversations that you might be having with yourself unbeknownst to yourself. And having these conversations with our kids is so enlightening to be like, oh, that's what you're scared of. And as a parent, by golly, we can work with that. And same with my own self, like, oh, that's what I'm afraid of. I think we can work with that differently. And I have more capacity now.
Can you speak a bit about, what are those tools like after you kind of recognized Becky is going off? Like what are the things that can be done to bring that, central nervous system back down, bring the prefrontal cortex back online?
So one other cool thing that we've learned with neuroscience is we do not operate top down. We do not operate prefrontal cortex logic and then feelings and then body. The way that your nervous system works is it takes in feedback first through your senses, up the brainstem, past the fight flight. And if it passes that, it's calm. And then you get to your thinking. So there's often times where we've done some work on our thoughts, but we have done zero work on our body. And so the body, there's another concept called the body keeps the score, which is when we do that fight flight, because your body is interconnected with your mind. It's a beautiful little masterpiece that we are. Your vagus nerve is what it's called, runs all the way down your brainstem. And when you get fight flight responses, guess what happens to that vagus nerve is it constricts and it gets ooh, tens. So a lot of people will say, ooh, I get really big belly aches when I'm anxious. Like I feel like I'm going to throw up, or I got tummy issues, or they'll tell me I feel like my heart is like, it's so like there's such tightness in my chest, or their shoulders, or their head, headaches and things like that. Well, guess what? Those are all along the vagus nerve. And so when we constrict that anxiety and it gets stuck, we may have in our mind released it. We may have understood Becky. We may have like had this conversation like we're having now, but gosh, my body still feels like we're in a war zone, right? And it's because your body hasn't been attended to. So it's a holistic understanding and learning. And you know what is the biggest help to that is breath. God gave you breath. He gave you breath, and it's a healing thing. But when we're not able to relax the body, then we're not giving the fullness of breath. And so we do short, shallow breaths, and our body literally comes like in a little ball of tension. And though our thoughts may be okay, our body is still acting in that self-preservation mode. So it could be that there are times where we need to pay attention to the body. And there could be exercises that you put into your life. Even walking is a very integrative neurological experience, or just simple breathing is a great one, or mindfulness, just being able to do a body scan head to toe and just say, where do I feel the tension? Just point it to me. So those would be daily practices to add in there, along with your good thoughtful practices, to help you along.
Yeah, no, this is so good. So I feel like I'm old enough to know, like, we grew up in a world where, like, hey, this is what I learned in school. But fast forward to 2026, it's like, this is what I learned online. This is what I learned on social media, things that pop up in our algorithm, experts coming in. So I will preface my question with that is like, I've heard a couple of things that I'd love to bounce off you, and you can be like, no, that's false, or that's a lie. So bear with me on this. So one of the things that I suffered a panic attack a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago. It rocked my world. It took me about a year and a half to feel like myself again. And so through that process, I found a couple of tools on my tool belt that when I feel my body kind of do this, I do two massive inhales, and that somehow lowers my anxiety pretty remarkably. And I don't know if it's a water pill on my end, but two like massive inhales, do that a few times, and then somehow some way I'm back to regulated. And so I'd love to know if that's something that people can maybe attach to their tool belt if they find themselves in a moment of anxiety or stress. But that for me has helped. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, and then I have another follow-up question.
Yes, of course it helps. Absolutely. You're giving life to your body. You're giving yourself the space you need to take care of yourself. Now, let me be honest with you. I'm not 100% sure how it works. Like, I don't have that knowledge. My mother-in-law is actually a breathwork instructor, and she's brilliant at this. But she does, like, I've gone to her class, and it's like an hour long. And I know it sounds kind of silly, but she does these breath works, and you'll do, most of the time it's like a in your nose, out your mouth, but there's different ones that she does, some in the mouth, out the mouth, and they'll do different things for the body. It's just, I don't get it, but I trust it.
Yeah. And then there's also that, I think it's a Navy SEAL training, like kind of like that box breathing, kind of tying it back to the whole breath thing. So my next question is, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, because I've heard this many times. I don't know if this is an urban myth or whatever, but this idea of when we are nervous and when we are excited, those are necessarily the same bodily reactions, but they're named different things. And so I've kind of subscribed to that idea in the sense of like, when I feel nervous, I in my brain tell it, it's like I'm excited. And so I do some stage work at my work, and so I get up on stage in front of people, and that helps me. Again, I don't know if it's a water pill or something that I've heard over time, but when I feel this way, I say, no, it's not nerves. No, I'm excited, and that for me triggers the ability to be like, okay, I can do what I'm about to do without the fear of whatever it is. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on this idea of whether it's nerves and anxiety, are they the same and we're just naming it differently, or in fact they are separate?
That's really cool. So I don't I guess this was good timing, but God knew what he was doing. I literally just saw an article that was looking at the neurochemistry picture of all the feelings, and they all look so different on the whole like the whole body chemistry. So like of course you can imagine anger and resentment, and the negative ones, they light up red, and they light up all over the body. Sadness lights up blue. It was just really interesting. So I think we really have a hard time discerning feeling for what it really is, until we train ourselves to do what you're doing, which is to observe it and give it some sort of name. And I do think we can shift our perspective. I think your mind is extremely powerful to shift those emotional experiences in line with what you want to do. Um, I don't think you're trying to deny. Well, here's what I would say: it's okay if you're both. Like, it's okay if you're nervous. I was a little nervous getting on this little podcast here, and like that's I was also very excited. Does it really matter? I'm not real sure, but I do think that when I come back into I this is a fun thing. This isn't a bad thing. This is a gift thing. This is a conversation connecting thing. When you can remind your body of what you're trying to accomplish through something that your body naturally has a tendency to keep you safe from any discomfort. And so it has a struggle recognizing, is this good discomfort or bad discomfort? Because discomfort is just discomfort. So I think what you're doing is super effective for you to keep you having fun and enjoying it and not taking it so seriously, but also honoring where you're at.
I am absolutely loving this conversation, but one thing that stands out to me is all the book recommendations. And if you're like me, you want to know what those books are, whether they're implied or whether they're explicit, I have a list for you that is linked in the description, as well as an invitation for you to join the Sonnal Summer Book Club. Every summer, we'll be going through a series of books that will help us focus in this noisy and complicated world. The first book we are launching with is Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, and the whole point is to take action on what we read. If that sounds like something that you'd like to do, there's a link in the description, or you can go to school.com/Sonnal. That's SKOOL.com/SONNAL. I would love to see you in the summer book club. Let's get back to the podcast.
And so in an attempt to be a good steward of your time, we do have a few more questions for you. I'm going to jump right into the second one, if that's okay.
Okay.
So we're at Sonnal, we're building our community, and we're finding this little pocket of people that really care about, being intentional, having a really good balance of life. And so we asked our community on social media for a question for you, if that's okay. And so the question
Fun.
that we chose from our audience is, what relational problems are trending in 2026 for struggling marriages and couples? Again, what relational problems are trending in 2026 for struggling marriages and couples?
There are some interesting cultural challenges that make it unique in this time. So that we've got gender identity. That is an interesting thing where couples are struggling to know how to navigate that with their own children. But having a child centric problem in any way is always a challenge for a couple, whether it be identity, whether it be illness, whether it be academics, whether it be whatnot. That will always strain a couple out. So that's just life of being in a family.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, no, I agree. I know that's a very general, kind of like broad question, because every family is different, right? Even within my household, my every kid, I have three kids, right? And they both have the same mom, and they both have the same, or they all three have the same mom and dad, but yet they're just wildly differently wired. And so, so I can see the issue there. And I feel like with the things that pop up in our kids' lives, I mean, there's so many variables that are impacting each and every individual and every kid, whether it's social media, whether it's identity, whether it's now this kind of like, what is AI? And so those things are new. So if you could give a parent one kind of big like compass point to like saying, hey, when these things arise, where should you, maybe turn to? I mean, I know that sounds silly, but like the Bible, right? But like, what is one bit of hope that you can give them in that season of life, wherever they are?
Yeah, that's really good. Um, so you guys know I love neuroscience, so I'm going to give you another little catchphrase. That which you resist, you persist. That which you resist, you persist. So name XYZ issue. If we are resistant to the issue and wanting to eradicate that from our kids, guess what? It's going to persist. Is that what you focus on? Is that what you become? So when you're like, we got to get this out of there, this ADHD issue, we got to get this gender issue. Name the issue that you're focusing on. If that it's easy for us to hyper focus on that issue and lose sight of the grand picture. Absolutely. I do that with my kids all the time. I have to reel myself in. I do that with myself all the time. And I go dichotomous, all good, all bad, all success, all terrible. We all do that in our anxiety. It's just not helpful or truthful, nor does it help you navigate whatever said issue really is and get to the heart of it, like we talked about at the beginning. I will say a secondary challenge, besides the issue becoming the only focal point that we focus on, is we truly struggle to do connection well. We struggle. Like couples come to me because they don't connect. Parents and kids come to me because they don't connect, because the issue is the only connection point that they have. They don't know how to actually connect. So go ahead. What were you going to say, Chris?
No, I'm saying that's fascinating. I mean, very interesting. Like when the issue is the only thing that they're connecting on, and not whether it's going out to eat or anything else, that a hobby or a sport or anything like that, that they can't just get away and just enjoy and be each other. When that becomes the only reason why you interact, like, of course it's going to like boil over.
Absolutely. You can see it so clearly on the outside edge, right? But on the inside, you are so worried as a parent and you are so worried as a spouse. Like you want marriage to work. No one goes to the altar going, you know what? I hope this fails. I hope this fails right now. Like we all go like, how do we make this people growing machine work for 50 maybe years when we're both growing at rapidly different rates and we're both getting life thrown at us in various forms? How are we going to stay together like that's what marriage is, y'all. That's hard. That's hard stuff. And so to stay connected and not making the issue the center ring of your family, I'll say cancer was a great example of that. Like if cancer was the center ring of our home, guess what? That's all we're focused on. And I lost my oldest daughter because she doesn't have cancer. Well, where's her story in the middle of this? If I make that the center ring of our home, if I make worry the center ring of our home, what's going to happen to my son? Like I'm portraying worry and concern, and I'm not portraying and guiding healing. I'm actually thwarting the process accidentally because I'm not managing my own fears, right? But one major thing I learned from the cancer journey that I love to tell spouses, people, all relationships, is if you are looking someone in the eyes and you're believing they can't do it, that impacts the whole thing. So when I look in my son's eyes, when he has to go through 2.5-year rounds of chemo, I have to look at him like, you got this, bro. Mama's here. I'm right next to you. My eyes are not telling you can't do this. Because he needs to look in my eyes and say, Mama knows I can. Mama's here. Daddy's here. God's here. We are together fighting a battle, right? Cancer isn't the center ring. We are the center ring. God's the center ring. And as I've applied that to our life along the way outside of that, I know that's a big high stress moment in our family, but it still applies now. Is the reading level of the third grader going to be the center of our home? Like whatever anxiety that I might have, if I look at my kids and I'm like, oh, I don't know, kid, what? I need to rally supports around my kids, but they are resource and God is moving through these painful moments in their life. And I have to trust that God is up to something good when they are in pain, because that's when we overstep it in relationships, is because it is so hard to watch each other go through hard things because we love each other, right? And we want to swoop in and save the day, or we want to be so afraid because we can't control it. And I can't control it, y'all. We can't control it. But what we can control is our own energy towards the healing of whatever the circumstance is. And that's what we talk about a lot in the counseling room, is if you're looking at your partner as the enemy, your relationship is going to show up like it's an enemy, right? Like I'm going to treat them like they're an enemy. I'm going to think about them like, oh, you know why he probably said that is because he doesn't think blah, 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 blah. He's not your enemy. She's not your enemy. But when we don't work through some of these issues of that perceptive thinking, we just start automatically jumping in like our perceptive thinking is true and accurate and right. And we end up attacking each other.
Talking about relationships and the breakdown of relationships, one of the things that I think is really important, especially in our day and age, and what we do at Sonnal, is we try to balance like this idea of focus, flow, and fun when it comes to work. And so when like the psychological safety portion, like I remember 2024, 2025, it was all over LinkedIn. It was what tech companies were touting. And then the tone has really changed recently. That's like stopped showing up in my feed. Can we talk about psychological safety, its importance, or is that just something that's made up? Can you speak to the psychological safety aspect in relationships?
Yeah, I mean, how could it not be important, right? Like just the word psychological safety. Imagine if you weren't feeling emotionally safe with someone, how are you supposed to show up? Is it safe to show up? What's going to happen, right? So predictability is one of those really important things, and especially in work cultures, but especially also in all relationships. And the thing that I point to with that is congruence. My action story and my verbal story are matching. And in psychologically unsafe cultures, whether it be a church family, whether it be a whatever organization or group of people we're talking about, there is a bunch of incongruence. Their action story, which is what they do, is not matching up with their verbal story, which is what they say. And so, though we don't call it, in the leadership world, we may not look to it as psychological safety anymore. Brene Brown, I think, was exploding at that time, bringing a bunch of really great vulnerability books and leadership books. And maybe we've moved on to some other good ideas out there. But the idea that it exists, it does exist. The idea that it is a part of your culture that you're building is just an absolute, for sure it is. I don't know what the most effective way to coach around it is right now, or what people are using instead of that right now. Do you know what people are using instead?
No, I just felt like the emotional climate has shifted. And sometimes leaders will follow an emotional climate instead of staying true to like what that North Star is for either building business or building a healthy marriage or healthy relationship. And so that's the congruence. What you're kind of saying is when somebody says one thing, but then they do another, how does that psychologically damage staff or a relationship when what's being said and what's being done don't align?
Well, let me just start it by this. If I say, hey guys, I really want your feedback on something, but I've already made the decision and I'm already going to roll no matter which way this conversation goes. Even if you tell me 10 red flags of what we're doing is wrong, I'm acting like I care about people's opinions and I want their stakeholder information and I want them to be a part of the journey, but my action story is going way the other way. So the next time I come to a meeting with my boss, I'm going to be like, he really doesn't care about my opinion. This is just all for smoke and screen of making you feel good about having this collaborative, quote unquote, air quote conversation, but it's not collaborative because it's simply not. The action story is what we will always believe. We will always believe the action story over the verbal story. Like if I said with my face, you can't see me if you're just listening to us, but if with my face, I was like, really glad that y'all are here and really excited to be on your podcast today. It's really great that you spent this time with me. You'll be like, what? Her, because 90, yes, 90%, upwards 94%, I think is where we're at right now, is nonverbal communication. 94. So it's the verbal story that goes out the window. That's what we're trying to really focus on as leaders is how do I pitch this and couch this really pretty? But we will always see the ugly behind the pretty eventually. We'll always see the real.
Yeah, I mean, and that leaks itself into every arena, politics, school, everything. So yeah, I totally get that. Oh man, that's good.
I've been in environments where it's like say one thing, do another, and I didn't catch on. I have inattentive like ADD type 2, and so like for me it was like always what was being said, like I would latch onto that, and then whenever the like the verbal factor was like here and the actions were different, I always assumed I did something wrong in those things. Like just the ADD was like, oh, I'm at fault here. Like I guess I did something wrong. And so I would always like internalize and look and see like, what did I do wrong in those moments? And it wasn't until another colleague pointed out, well, hey, have you noticed that this person says this, they do that? And then it was like, oh, wow, you're absolutely right. It was like a light bulb moment. What are some, I mean, you've given us some telltale ways to figure that out. How can somebody make a shift or a change if they're seeing that within their work culture? And maybe they're not the leader. What are some things that they could potentially do to either help change the work culture or either to protect themselves from what's happening?
That's really good.
And quitting is not the answer.
Yeah. Get out now, run. Sometimes that is the answer for sure. Sometimes you can only go so far with the resources that you have. And that is okay to say, I'm out of resources and I need to find a different way. So that's such a good question. And I would say, if I could put you know how I like words. So if you can identify these words as over functioning and under functioning, I think that might help you navigate that culture a little bit differently with a lot more empowerment and a lot more discernment. So over functioning is what you may have just described, where I take over responsibility. I assume the best of someone else, but I'm assuming the worst of me. So I'm trying to fix or change or rescue the culture or appease the outside world. And that, y'all, we get burnt out pretty quick. You can imagine if I overfunction at my house or wherever I am, I'm worn out because I only have so much energy throughout the day. And I also can underfunction, which is not take enough responsibility. So in these situations, we don't, especially in the church family, we don't do honesty very well. We really struggle to have honest, speak truth and love conversations, to get clarity, to get curious and say, can you help me understand? You said this yesterday, and this is what I'm seeing. Can you help me understand that? To have the boldness to, we're not being disruptive, but I mean, we might disrupt someone's day. We might disrupt someone's schedule. They may not like the questions that we're asking, but they're very helpful to get you to discern what is my responsibility here? Whose role is what? And when we're over functioning, we are emotionally carrying too much. And when we're under functioning, we're requiring other people to carry too much. So when leaders underfunction, the degree they underfunction is the exact degree the employee will feel the need to overfunction or flippity flop. Does that make sense? It's like this wonderful little mathematical equation, and it makes so much sense when you pause and you're like, where did my energy go today? Oh, it went to like emotionally shielding my boss from the feelings of my discomfort of like asking him a question that might make him angry or frustrated. Well, guess what? You are picking up on something about your boss and their leadership style that's not yours to own, but you do have to understand how to work with that leadership and that style. So it becomes kind of tricky of how you want to navigate it.
I find that very, very fascinating that both sides have to equal. And you also said something there that you might disrupt their day. What really helped me was a book called The Courage to be Disliked. And it's about finding your responsibility that's not mine to hold. And it was one of those light bulb moments of, oh, I'm holding too much. I am trying to be overtly responsible. And I'm not trying to make people mad and get them angry and riled up. But if the conversation comes to it, I shouldn't be, tiptoeing around their emotional, like what they're going to respond with. I just have to bring what I know to be true to the table. However they respond emotionally, that's outside of my control. And once I started to figure those things out, it was like light bulbs started to go off of what's within my control and what's outside of my control. So that what you said, like the equals, like both relationships have to be equal, have profoundly helped. And so I imagine that could be helpful also within like romantic relationships, friendships, and every sort of relationship. And so I guess the next question for you would be, what tools should we have in every relationship toolkit? What should we, what are the staples that if somebody was struggling in a relationship, what would be like 2 to 3 things that you would give them to help them stay anchored and help them stay, in healthy relationships?
That's really good. So I was sitting at my office one day asking myself this very question, like if I could give tips of the trade, like what would these words be like? Because it feels so like there's like a million. And of course, that's not reasonable for me to aim for a million things a day. I'm probably going to drop, a million of them. I'm not going to hold on to any of them. I'm not going to do any of them well if I have no focal point. And so out of that time came my first content, which is relational leadership. And I deduced it to 7. Now it's not 2 or 3, but I deduced it to 7 habits that I saw Jesus doing in relationships, built in the neuroscience, built in the God's word stuff. And those have become, I know it's not 3 and I know it's 7, but I'll just share those really quickly. One is perspective. Everything we've talked about, that understanding the neurochemistry part of things, that fight flight, Jesus was fully aware of that response in people, and he also had them himself. And he was able to get perspective, an objective point of view outside of this subjective experience of our fight flight. And so perspective is a really important habit to have. Like, what's the real picture here? And without that real picture, it becomes very hard to anchor yourself anywhere. And the second one is presence. When God's presence, I ask people to imagine how God's face looks upon them. It's called God's gaze upon you. And what does his face look like when he is talking to you? What does he sound like when he's talking to you? What do you picture? God's word says his presence is infinitely loving and kind and gracious. But that is not the presence we often think God has or other people have or we have of ourselves. So being present in the present moment is also very difficult to do with our technology because we're very distracted. So being present is another one. Humility, that's the third one. And the question I pose to we people is like, what if Jesus wasn't humble? You lose the whole gospel. you lose everything. You lose everything. So humility is important. The fourth one is honesty. speaking truth in love, being honest with ourself about ourself, being able to communicate in an effective way, helpful. The fifth one is responsibility, taking appropriate responsibility. We talked about that a bit. What is my responsibility to take? A lot of times we don't like the responsibility of confessing our wrongdoings to people, or we don't like the responsibility of, you know what, no matter what you did, I have to own the fact that I spoke to you this way. And that's not who I want to be. It's very hard for us to not look at the other person's behavior and justify our own. And so that responsibility one's really important, that at the end of the day, no blame, no shame, but this is what I did to contribute to where we're at. It may not be equal, but this is what I did. The sixth one is endurance. Like, life is hard. And the seventh one is resolve. You have to have the resolve to hold fast and to keep sticking with relationships for them to be beautiful and effective. It does not happen overnight. It is not something you're just going to walk and stumble upon. One of my favorite clients recently was like, I have now realized it's not just going to magically happen. All this thought, like good thoughts, is not enough. I have to have resolve to do it. And I'm like, brilliant. Yes, you do.
I appreciate that so much, because I feel like having steps or having like these numbered, things that we need to add to ourselves is really crucial in that. Where can people find you? How can people connect with you? How can they get these 7 tools to improve their relationships?
So I am online, www.relationalequipping.com, or you can email me, Lindsey@relationalequipping.com. That's the best way to get in touch with me. Right now, I do a lot of live teaching. There is some video teaching that I have, but mostly it's live teaching or coaching or counseling. So that's how the best way to get in touch with me. If you want any of these tools, just let me know and we'll figure it out.
Hey, thank you for listening to this podcast. If you made it all the way till the end, would you consider subscribing? And if you are looking for ways to increase your focus in this noisy and distracted world, I highly suggest you check out our Sonnal focus journals. You can go to simplysonnal.com today to learn more about the Sonnal focus method and how it can improve your life. Till we chat again, I hope you work and rest at the pace of grace. Peace.